Welcome once again to Spotlight, and Toni is with us once again to give us an update on what is happening in Spain. Now, we've cheated and flown to a tropical island away from everything, especially the coronavirus. Welcome, Toni.
Good afternoon, Rodney. Lovely to see you again.
And you now look, things in Spain, they say, are getting a bit better, and something special is going to be announced early next week.
Well, you know, it seems like we're getting a breather. You know, they announced last night, the president, that we're going back to the 29th of March confinement. So as of tomorrow, all the not all the non-essentials, but many non-essential businesses will be returning back to work. So that brings about a whole lot of different questions, because they're supposed to be social distancing. Do they wear masks? Apparently it's not obligatory, but it is advisable. So a lot of different factors have to be looked into.
Can you get masks? Can you buy masks at the farmacia?
There are many places you can still not get masks. And they keep on, it's kind of funny though, because, and that's also why they can't make it a mandatory thing, because there aren't masks. Many of the pharmacies have, have notices up saying there are no masks, and they're trying to get in masks. So they say, okay, you can even wear a scarf around your mouth, which is actually sometimes maybe even better deterrent, because it's thicker. Because some of these very thin and flimsy masks are not really, the best tool to use. But you see all sorts. People have done homemade masks. And many use scarves, etc., etc. So we'll see how that is going forward.
Well, it's not very pleasant in a hot supermarket to wear a mask, is it?
Well, I mean, we have the air conditioning, and also now limited members go in. Limited amount of people go into supermarkets. So you basically have to queue up outside, and they let in a certain amount at a time. So trying to keep that distance. So it's really not very bothersome. But for someone that like myself wears specs, it can be a bit of a pain, because your specs messed up wearing the mask, But yeah, I mean, it's supposedly a form of protection. So let's see, how it is going forward.
Indeed.
But there are huge concerns, because, Spain is mostly a tourism country, and most of our income comes from tourism. And so now they say, I mean, you can't apply that figure everywhere, because in every part of Spain it differs. But if you look at the general graph, 15% of Spain's income is from tourism. And of course, restaurants and bars and all of that are not opening. And hotels, pretty much, I was listening to an interview last night, the director of Marriott. They've pretty much written off the numbers for 2020. Yeah. And it's looking rather gloomy. And so they're saying there's 50% of the hotels will be opening up. And when they do, we don't know if it's probably going to be for the summer, and there's going to be a lot of restrictions and rules to abide by. And so you have a workforce, with bars and restaurants and hotel employees of about almost close on 2 million people that their future is rather uncertain.
Well, we have heard on the grapevine that an announcement will shortly be made saying that hotels can start booking from the 29th of May.
Yeah, but now, like this Marriott director said, people are going to be very cautious about traveling. Yeah. And of course, now there's the concern, as people return back to work, if there's going to be another wave of this, as people that are asymptomatic go back into, the atmosphere, if you'd like to call it. And so there's a lot of uncertainties, but of course the economic side needs to crank up. You can't keep the economy depressed as it is. It's an earthquake that's happening. And but my heart does go out to especially a lot of restaurant business, bar owners, etc., because they have had no assistance. and it's just dire for them. And yet they've got to continue paying their taxes, etc. So it looks very bleak, I'm afraid.
There are grants in the United Kingdom for restaurants and bar owners, particularly, and rate relief, but there's none of that in Spain.
No, I mean, I was actually listening in this broadcast last night. They were talking to a restaurant owner, and she says that, you know, she amongst millions, they just feel forgotten and left on this, you know, on the behind. And the government said no one will be left behind, but you know, there many are, and they feel that way. They're not getting any assistance. And you know what's interesting is the EU have, you know, there's been these EU talks last week, and there's a lot of issues whether or not EU countries should support and bail out, you know, the southern European countries like Italy and Spain with this crisis. And of course they have done what they call the Corona bonds, right? Well, so nicknamed the Corona bonds. And of course the Germans, the Dutch, and the Austrians do not want to go for this, because they don't feel it's right that they should be taxing their people to pay and help out the southern European countries. Of course, you know, Spain is a very much pro-European country and wants to uphold the European flag, and is sort of really downcast about the situation that we're finding ourselves in.
Well, downcast is not mutiny, as we are seeing in Italy. Nearly 80% people in Italy are saying, oh, the EU does not work.
Yeah, you know, I was actually reading an article just before we came on, where some economists are actually saying Spain and Italy should never have joined the euro. Well, anyway, so now we have the supposed 500 billion package that I think is sort of aid to help out the southern European countries. But would you believe 240 of the 540 billion package goes to the government, right? 200 billion of that to companies. And guess we can all think who are the companies that are going to get it. It's probably the large companies, right?
Yeah.
And only 100 billion is going to workers. So, I mean, you know, when all the companies were put on hibernation, with the so-called ERTE, you know, and the government said everybody will be receiving something, you know, nobody's going to be left. And so it turns out 600,000 of these applications were made during the month of March, and these people are not going to have any income until May.
Yeah.
So it is a dire situation.
Are the civil servants working, or are they being furloughed?
I think it depends. A lot of them apparently, if you can work from home, you can do the work from home. It's like this one commentary of one of the directors of the La Razón newspaper said, you know, the funcionarios, the governmental workers will always get paid, you know, they always get sorted out above everyone else. But I'm not sure how. I think each individual office, governmental office, have different, you know, guidelines, whether they can work from home or not, or, you know, if they come in limited amount of people and have their social distancing, etc. So you know, I think it differs from government office to government office.
Yeah, let's think about Vox, the right wing in Spain. Are they making the most of this, and are they being fair?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of, I think post-pandemic, a lot of facts are going to come out. And already there's a lot of information coming out about when the first case actually arrived here in Spain, which was way before, and how the government tried to keep it quiet and say, don't call it a coronavirus during a 2-week period in February. So they rightfully are being critical. And I think they need to call to question. Of course, this is a horrendous situation, I think, for any government. But if there has been information that has been silenced and not been used at the right time to alert the public, and especially the medical staff, you know, they need to be called to task to it. So there was a Congress meeting last week, and it was actually very interesting because Vox, the far right party, really hammered the government, and they did not agree to the extended 2-week, they just abstained from it, to extend the state of alarm for two more weeks instead of emergency. So, and interestingly enough, the separatist parties were also extremely critical of the government. And they have been in alignment with when the government was formed, along with the socialist Marxist side. And they have come down very, very strongly on the government, which was quite interesting to see. Of course, their point of view is, we don't want to see Spanish military in our regions, So they are saying, if this is a health crisis, why is there heavy military presence? So it's interesting. But from the military and the police side, there has been so many arrests, and it's been, it could be a huge pool of funds for the government for all the fines that they have issued for people that have been supposedly breaking, the confinement rules.
Well, what can you now do, or what will you be able to do from next week? Supermercados, of course, yes. Supermarkets are okay, farmacias are okay. What's changing? Which shops will now be open?
Well, I don't think, I'm not sure, like as you said, supermarkets, pharmacies, I don't think businesses like hairdressing and all of that, it's going to go to the situation it was just before they extended the state of emergency. So I would assume we still don't have commercial centers open, we don't have clothing stores open. So it'll be the essential services plus those people like who work in construction, everybody related to that field, the banking, supposedly insurance. But the others, I think, are going to be confined still until the 26th of April.
Will you still have to take letters with you when you're driving to work, or if you're self-employed, driving to your self-employed work, so the police won't arrest you?
Well, I would think they've relaxed that restriction because prior to the second confinement or quarantine rules, you could go about doing your business if you fall within the categories that are stated, right? So hopefully, the police, etc., and Guardia Civil have been informed of those rulings and, not trying to exert their authority with that. But still, they keep on stating it's still a quarantine. They're not relaxing the procedure. And for instance, children can still not go out and we can't do exercise or anything like that. It was quite interesting. I saw an interview with Nigel Farage on LBC, and he was shocked at the whole situation in France, that they don't even allow now, well, actually they do allow you to do an hour's exercise, but you have to do a letter, like the one you're mentioning, from the state stating what time you're going to be out and what time you're back, and it must be within an hour. But here in Spain, we've had the strongest and the strictest restrictions. We're not even allowed an hour's exercise, which really defies logic, because you're entering into a situation where socially it's a disaster. People that are mentally not quite right are starting to lose it. Suicides are up. Abuse is apparently 3 times the amount it was. People calling in with the emergency number. So
are people actually getting bolshy?
I think there are people that feel that way, and you see an expression of it in social media. But the problem is you've got a government who actually, funny enough, is so anti-Franco, but is acting in an extreme fascist fashion with hefty fines. So you got people that want to maybe lead a revolution and go out on the streets, but just couldn't afford, facing a hefty fine or being incarcerated. Unlike in many of the other countries, we have a lot of police and military out on the streets. So
finally, what do you see for this summer? Because lots of Brits, lots of Northern Europeans spend a long time in Spain or just come for the fortnight's holiday. Is it going to happen?
I doubt it. Reason being is, I think on the forefront of everybody's mind is going to be, what if I go on my holiday and there's another outbreak and I'm forced to do a quarantine. I think a lot of people are just not going to take that risk. And then they were saying, what about, promoting tourism within Spain? But of course, economically and socially, people have been so hit. I don't think they're going to feel so happy about, going on trips in the majority sense. I'm sure there will be people that will. But of course, now there is something to keep an eye out on, because the government here is talking a lot about having a health passport where you are cleared. And so to prove you are immune to the virus or don't have the virus, and that you are able to travel. So they are sowing the seeds of that. How quickly they'll come to that is another issue.
This is Chinese communism by another name.
Well, it's astounding. I mean, we spoke about it last week about this app, geolocator app they want to place, but it's really starting to say, when you know these things and you watch the media and how they're starting to already sow those seeds in the minds of the public. And of course, it's all done under solidarity, for the general good of everybody. We've got to look out for everybody. Now they're even talking about they want to start what China had, they called, those Noah's Arks. But the strangest thing is they want to use these Noah's Arks for people with very light symptoms or who are just asymptomatic. And it's like, why would you want to go into one of those facilities? There's also a lot of questions about this PCR test they want to do, because now the government has stated that they are going to test 30,000 families. I don't know how they're going to pull the numbers or how they're going to get who they're going to target. And they're going to do a sample to see what these people are. And they're going to do 2 tests, the rapid test, which is not always accurate, and a PCR test, which is obviously more expensive. I mean, then again, it comes, the state doesn't have a lot of money, and we are, 47 million people. How are you going to do that in the long run? But they already are sowing the seeds of having everybody have a health passport that clears you. And
you can have your children taken away from you, as I understand it, if they test positive.
That came from the World Health Organization that was saying, that it may necessarily be that they can come in and take your children, whoever has, who might be asymptomatic, and pull them away from the others and put them into quarantine. That sounds extremely Orwellian and very upsetting and disrupting it could be to the family. So, watch this space. But Spain certainly is following very closely the guidelines of the World Health Organization. And, but to date, a lot of information is coming out about them, and hopefully a lot of, information that needs to come out will come out, and the government here will think twice. Because, Spain is very much a pro-family country in general. So I don't know if, they would think in those kind of extreme measures.
Indeed, we must leave it there. I can see flights to Spain and hotel rooms at such ridiculous prices. People will come and take a chance. We'll, as you just said, watch this space. Thank you so much, Toni. We'll speak shortly.
Okay. Take care. Stay safe and healthy.